Greetings, viewers. So the second article in Uplink 4 is on a wonderful, wonderful video game from one of the most innovative developers in contemporary Taiwan, the studio called Red Candle. And amazing bunch of folks, two fantastic video games, and they're both horror survival experiences. The first is called Detention, came out in 2017, and their latest is called Devotion, came out this year, 2019, but is unofficial. It was released and then it had to be taken down for reasons I'll explain in just a second. Both are wonderful games and cover some very uncomfortable terrain, like any good horror survival game. The issues of the survival and the horror are, when they're meaningful and they're politically meaningful, they have a kind of a power and force unique to that genre. Detention is basically a psychological journey into the mind of someone who survived the 1960s in Taiwan. And we're given a few clues, but the basic story is that a young teenager in Taiwan experiences the wrath of the one-party state of Taiwan, Chiang Kai-shek's dictatorship and the Kuomintang dictatorship, which committed terrible human rights abuses and did some horrible things to Taiwanese citizens in the 50s, 60s, 70s. And there were long battles against one-party state in Taiwan for their democracy, which eventually succeeded. And today, Taiwan is a somewhat functional democracy, and that's a result of all those struggles. So this tells a very sad story of someone who is deeply damaged by the violence of the state, and talks about her trauma and how she attempts to deal with the question of responsibility, culpability, and guilt. It's very, very well done. Many of the elements of the game borrow from elements of Silent Hill and some of the horror survival narratives, but it has its own unique Taiwanese folklore, flair, storytelling, and very well done. Their next game, though, Devotion, and this is the story that covers most of what the article is about, and I'll provide the Patreon link. Again, I emphasize everything is behind a paywall, but I will be releasing everything for free to the public in 3 months, so you'll eventually get to read the article. Their latest game, Devotion, is a huge step up from their first game. The first game is wonderful, but still had some of the limitations of the genre. Devotion is a full 3D first-person experience with very realistic environments, and it tells the story of a young girl growing up in what seems to be a very ordinary middle-class Taiwanese family of the 1980s. So, and they have middle-class things. They have a little kitchen, they have a television set, a color TV, they have knickknacks and trinkets and school books and this, that. And they seem like this normal, happy family. But of course, it doesn't stay that way for very long because there are all these internal stresses, tensions, and the narrative is constructed very, 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 very well. So the first-person camera, the environmental design is fantastic in Devotion. Really excellent environmental design. They really got the environments right. And you can look at the things in the world and pick them up and examine them. The design team spent a lot of time and care to craft this very realistic world. And they kind of turned weakness into strength because Red Candle's not a big studio. And the limits on studios are that character animation faces are really expensive and require a lot of features, a lot of money. And if you don't have that money, how do you create characters? Well, you can use sort of animation techniques, or you can create compelling side content and stories and characterization. And that's what Red Candle did. So everything has stories in the world. And you look around and everything has a little tale and story. And there's tons of things to read, interact with. And of course, the level of horror is very, very well done because there's nothing cheap about the horror. There's nothing, very few jump scares, 1 or 2 that come close to that, but they're actually not jump scares. There's something else. And they managed to succeed by making very normal situations, like a child's bedroom and a children's doll. There's nothing more ordinary than that. And yet somehow it turns very creepy because you look one way, you look at the doll, you look another way, and you look at the doll's changed position. And so what's ordinary suddenly turns into the eerie, uncanny, extraordinary. And the game is constantly doing this in small, subtle ways to change our frame of reference. Very, very skilled, very subtle. What comes out of it all, I will keep the spoilers to a minimum. It's a fantastic, fantastic video game experience. And I've limited the spoilers in my review. But one of the most fundamental issues about Devotion is that it is not really about Taiwan in the 1980s. It's actually a story about being in mainland China and growing up in the 2000s, particularly after 2008. The walls are starting to close in, and this kind of thin veneer of normality that the 30-year boom sort of created for a lot of middle class and working class Chinese people that thought, oh, the boom would go on forever and it would just get more money and everything's be fine, so we don't have to worry about politics. Suddenly that's coming to an end, and the nightmare years are beginning in the sense that, oh, this isn't good, and all the assumptions. So really what Devotion, and the real reason that Devotion uh, triggered the ire of the party censors, and there's a whole hate campaign due to some artwork located which was critical of Xi Jinping, the leader of China, et cetera. But the real reason that the mainland Chinese were really, really upset and sensed that a faction of the party state was upset with a work of art and basically had it banned, it's about mainland China. It's about the unfolding class struggles, social contradictions happening right now inside China, where the young generation is realizing that the one-party state is nothing but a plutocratura. It's a ruling elite that doesn't care about China or its people and is out to line its own pockets and monopolize power forever. And you're not going to get anything from these people. You're going to have to struggle against them and create a democratic space. So 1.4 billion people in China now have the task of creating a civil society for themselves, a space of democracy, free speech, free thinking, free assembly, rights which are the rights of workers, their proletarian rights that workers had to fight for centuries and centuries and centuries.